There's a reason soldiers once feared the sound of flutes. Not the sound itself, but what followed. A lullaby, a harmony, then nothing. Villages left cold, rooms still warm from bodies no longer alive. No struggle, no scream, just one thing in common. A wooden box, 12 holes, one cursed breath. The records were mostly erased, burned, sealed, dismissed as myth, but a handful remain, smuggled into private libraries, hidden in old German hymnals, buried between the margins of Catholic exorcism reports. They tell of an instrument known only by a whisper, der Nachtton, the night tone, a flute carved from ash wood, inlaid with silver, tuned not to pitch, but to pain. It didn't play music, it drained. The first mass death was recorded in 1623 in a town called Lichtensteinfeld, Bavaria. All 73 inhabitants were found dead in their homes, eyes wide, mouths open, hands clutched to their chests. There were no wounds, no signs of poison, no attackers. Only one thing was found in the center of the town square, a flute, resting upright in a bowl of milk, its mouthpiece still damp. His name was Otto Herschel, a failed composer, a gifted flutist, and a man recently exiled from Prague for reasons never made public. He wandered from town to town, playing for coins and sleeping beside his cart, whispering lullabies into the dark, until one night, during a snowstorm, he came upon the village of Lichtensteinfeld. He asked for shelter. They gave him bread and fire. He repaid them the only way he knew how, with a performance. They gathered in the chapel, 17 families, the priest, a traveling tanner, even the mayor's children. Otto stood before them with a strange flute, not his usual one. This one was darker, longer. Its silver inlays shimmered even in the candlelight. He didn't announce the piece. He just played. The sound was wrong. Soft at first, like a lullaby remembered from a fever dream, but then it bent. A note that shivered in their teeth. A melody that fell just short of sanity. Children began to cry. The priest stood, shouting something. But Otto played louder, eyes shut, body rigid, until he collapsed. The next morning, the town was silent, truly silent. No wind, no birds, no breath. A merchant found them while passing through doors locked from inside. Meals uneaten, fireplaces still glowing, and every villager dead. Otto's body was not among them, but his cart was. Empty, except for the flute sitting beside a loaf of uneaten rye. The flute didn't stay buried. It never did. 2 years after the deaths in Lichtensteinfeld, rumors reached Prague of a manuscript found in the abandoned chapel. Pages of music, strange notes, written not in ink, but in dried blood. They called it the Rotlied manuscript. And when it arrived in Prague, it found the one man desperate enough to decipher it, Caspar Klingenberg, a court composer, a genius, and a man quietly descending into madness. Caspar had lost favor with the Bohemian royal court. His music was too experimental, too sharp. They said it made their heads ache. But when he saw the Rotlied, he wept, not out of fear, out of admiration. These are tones that shouldn't exist. He wrote intervals that slide between flesh and bone. He began transcribing it line by line, and the more he wrote, the more his body changed. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. And when servants brought food to his chamber, they heard it, a flute, playing in a locked room, though no flute had ever entered. Casper began saying strange things in his diary. The melody hums when I sleep. The tone speaks in colors. It knows when I hesitate. He composed in candlelight, sometimes cutting his own fingers to finish the notes. By winter, he had rewritten the entire Rotlied into a new work, Die Let Still, the final silence, a composition for solo flute. With one requirement, the instrument must be carved from the ash of a witness tree. Casper wrote, "A witness tree is one that has seen death without being seen." He claimed the original Nachtton flute was carved from such a tree, one that had grown at the foot of a mass hanging during the Black Death. Its roots were soaked in screams. Its bark hardened with silence. He believed tone is memory, that certain vibrations unlock buried pain, that the right note could call death like a dog, and he wanted to perfect it. In 1615, Casper performed the final silence for a secret circle of nobles and musicians. Only 7 were in attendance. Casper played from behind a curtain, claiming the flute must not be seen while it sings. By the 5th minute, one guessed a Danish diplomat began to bleed from the ears. Another man collapsed, convulsing. Casper never stopped playing. When he finished, 5 of the 7 guests were dead. One was deaf and blind. The last had bitten off his own tongue. Casper, he vanished into the crowd. All that remained was the flute humming faintly on the curtain floor. Days later, Casper's body was found floating in the Veltava River. No sign of trauma, just this note pinned to his chest. I heard what no man should, and now I will forget. The flute was gone. So was the Rotlied. But years later, another massacre would occur. Another flute would be found, and another melody almost the same would echo over the snow. They say music is eternal. But what if? Some music refuses to die quietly. By the late 18th century, SANCs had become fashionable. Paris was obsessed with the mystical. Psychics, spirit boards, crystal harmonics. It was all a game for the elite, until the night music killed them. Her name was Elise Moreau, 12 years old, blindfolded since birth. They called her La Petite Porteuse, the little carrier. Her mother claimed she was touched by angels, but those close to the family whispered darker things. She speaks in voices that aren't hers. She sings in her sleep, but never in French. She plays the flute, but no one ever taught her. On October 29, 1783, the Marquise de Louvel invited 14 guests to her salon. Wine, conversation, ritual. At midnight, they dimmed the chandeliers. Elise entered, escorted by her mother. In her small, trembling hands a wooden flute, ancient-looking, its surface carved with strange markings. The Marquise smiled. This, she said, was passed to us through centuries of silence. Elise sat, lifted the flute, and began to play. The melody was simple. At first, 3 soft notes, then one low, buzzing hum like wind caught in a grave. One guest leaned forward, entranced. Another gripped his chest. As the notes rose, the chandelier flickered, though no draft moved. By the 2nd minute, one woman was weeping. A man convulsed, nose bleeding. Elise never stopped. The flute sang high and sharp, then low and slow. A violin string snapping inside the soul. And then, silence. At dawn, the butler found them. All 14 guests dead. Elise's mother gone, and Elise? She was sitting beneath the table, eyes wide open, blood trickling from her ears. She whispered, "I didn't know it could hear us." The Parisian Gazette reported it as a case of poisoning. Gas leak, spoiled wine, madness, but private journals from surviving staff tell a different story. The mirrors shattered inward, The parlor clocks all stopped at the same moment. The little girl hummed the melody for 2 days straight. Even after she'd gone mute, the flute was confiscated. But it disappeared en route to the bishop's vault, vanished without a trace. Some believe Elisa's mother took it, fled into the Alps, later executed as a witch. Others say it was buried with the Marquise, who was mistakenly buried alive. And then there's the Vatican theory that the church retrieved it and locked it in a chamber beneath St. Cecilia's Basilica, where cursed music is in tune. But whatever the truth, the melody would return, always just when the world began to forget, because the song doesn't die. It waits. The First World War was a theater of mechanical horror, artillery, gas, machine guns, but in one forgotten ravine outside the Somme, men didn't die from bullets. They died from sound. No bombs, no shells, just a melody drifting through the smoke. And by morning, every soldier in the trench was dead. According to military logs, 84 French soldiers were stationed in Trench 39B in March 1917. The night was quiet. No shelling. No reported enemy presence. At 4:13, a strange transmission crackled over field comms, song in the smoke. It's beautiful. Tell mother it's all right. That was the last anyone heard. A recovery team found all 84 men dead in their trenches the next morning. No wounds, no blood, no sign of trauma. Eyes open, mouths agape, hands clutched to ears. Caught in the barbed wire at the northern edge of the trench, they found a single object, a flute, splintered, caked in mud, marked with silver rings. One of the recovery medics noted, "I didn't want to touch it. It felt warm, like something had just played it, and the air around it buzzed." The report was quickly sealed, but a photograph survived. It shows the flute balanced on barbed wire with dead men at both ends of the trench, like the melody had spread from the center outward. A priest stationed nearby, Father Lemoyne, requested access to the site. His private notes were later uncovered. I recognized the markings. The child Elise Moreau carved similar spirals into her diary pages. And the shape, it matches sketches from the Prague blood manuscripts. He demanded the flute be destroyed. It was instead sent to Rome for protection, but it never arrived. The military escort transporting it never returned. Their vehicle was found 3 days later. No bodies, only a single blood trail leading from the truck to a clearing in the woods. At the center, a stone circle, and a single note carved into the earth like a rune. Listen. France officially denied the event. Trench 39B was reassigned. Maps were edited. Witnesses relocated. Records misfiled, but in the years that followed, reports continued. German units walking toward empty bunkers, smiling, then falling still. A British patrol describing a lullaby in the fog before disappearing. A military dog found alive, shaking uncontrollably with a flute clenched in its jaws. No one could explain how it traveled. But every time, it left no player, only silence. Perhaps the melody doesn't need lungs, just ears. By the mid-20th century, the Nachtton had vanished again, or so the world believed. But in the cold, echoing halls of Greystone Psychiatric Hospital, it resurfaced, not as sound, but as memory. A memory no one should have had. Her name was Ruth Adley, a music teacher. Admitted after suffering a breakdown during a school recital, she began screaming that the notes were wrong. A witness wrote, said they were waking it up. Double quotes. At T. Greystone. She became calm, too calm, sat still for hours, hummed a tune no one recognized. wouldn't speak unless asked about flutes. Then she'd say, "I hear it," beneath the floor, waiting to be played. It started with crayon sketches. Flutes long, warped, silver-ringed. They were identical, even more disturbing. Patients in the men's wing began drawing the same images without ever seeing Ruth's work. One drew a spiral of notes that, when played on a piano, sounded hauntingly familiar to music historians. It echoed a portion of Die Letzte, still the composition written in blood by Caspar Klingenberg over 300 years earlier. But none of these patients had access to instruments. None of them could read sheet music. And yet, they remembered the song. Greystone's director, Dr. Alan Roth, was skeptical until he began recording sessions. He placed Ruth in a soundproof room, asked her to hum what she heard at night. She did. And the audio tape warped, literally bent. Technicians reported sudden migraines. 2 nurses fainted. The tape was confiscated and sent to a sound engineer at Cambridge. He never returned it. 2 weeks later, his assistant found him slumped over a desk, headphones still on, the reel still spinning, playing nothing, or so they thought. Slowed to 0.7x speed and reversed, a strange melody emerged, and with it, a breath. Before Ruth vanished, and yes, she vanished, she left one final object in her cell. A baby tooth, wrapped in silk, tucked into the mouth of a crude doll made of twisted paper and human hair. When asked why she'd done it, she whispered, "It plays better when it's fed." She was found missing from her locked room 3 days later, window untouched, cameras dark, only a low humming left on the audio monitor, like a flute being played somewhere down a very long tunnel. Years later, a bootleg copy of Ruth's humming tape was pressed to vinyl. It became a curiosity among avant-garde composers in the 1970s. Most dismissed it as mental illness caught on tape, but some reported hallucinations, tinnitus, dreams of trees whispering, and always a flute playing just out of reach. One copy made its way to America. And in 1980, a rural church in Missouri burned to the ground during a midnight silent vigil. Only one item was recovered from the altar: a wooden flute, mouthpiece split, still warm. We keep thinking we've buried it, but you can't bury sound, not really. You can only hope it forgets the way back. It had gone quiet again, and no new sightings. No confirmed deaths for nearly a decade. The Nachtton, the death flute, faded from memory, but evil doesn't disappear. It changes shape. In this case, into a toy, a music box that killed not through breath, but through clockwork. In the remote village of Valle Ombre, Shadow Valley, an orphanage took in children left behind by war, sickness, and superstition. In 1994, the home was run by Sister Adriana, a nun with a habit of collecting antiques from flea markets and burial estates. One such item was a small music box, painted ash wood, delicate carvings of vines and animals, a tiny silver inlay at the winding key, a spiral. She gave it to a mute boy named Iancu, who never smiled until the day he wound the box. The melody was gentle, sweet, but off. It dragged a half beat behind itself, like it was echoing from another room, and when it played, Iancu would sway gently, eyes closed, lips mouthing something no one could understand. The other children stopped playing. They stopped talking. Some began drawing the same flute, just like the patients at Greystone, and then, one by one, they began to die. It wasn't immediate. It was methodical. Every night at 2:33 a.m., a child would be found dead in bed. And no wounds. No noise, just pale skin, eyes wide open, mouth slightly agape, and each time, the music box was found ticking gently beside them. It was never wound. The deaths always followed the same sequence. Left to right across the dormitory row, one child per night, until Sister Adriana realized the box was moving on its own. She threw it into the furnace, locked the door, prayed. The next morning, the music box sat on her pillow, still warm, still ticking, but now the song had changed. It skipped every sixth note. That night, 2 children died at the exact moment the missing notes would have played. She begged the local priest to bless it. He agreed, but during the ceremony, he dropped to his knees, bleeding from the nose. He whispered, "It's not music, it's memory, and it hates silence." Before fleeing the orphanage, Sister Adriana made one audio recording of the music box's lullaby. She mailed it to a professor of folklore in Cluj-Napoca. He played it once, on tape. He never spoke again. His house was found empty, doors locked, windows sealed. Only one thing out of place. The tape was still spinning, and in the silence, a faint tick, tick, tick. That tape, years later, was sampled by a Berlin experimental band. The track was uploaded to the early internet. Within 24 hours, the site's server crashed. 7 users who commented on the audio were later found dead at 2:33 a.m. What if the melody doesn't need to be heard live? What if it learned to live in recordings? What if it's evolving? They thought it was just a file, just another dark web mystery, a weird audio clip from an abandoned German archive, passed around in forums like a dare. Its title was simple: Nachtton 000 WAV. Just 13 seconds long. No metadata. No history. No source. But once it started playing, it didn't stop. The file surfaced in a hidden thread on the Deep Sound, an invite-only music subforum buried in the Tor network. A user named ListHost13 uploaded it. He claimed it came from an unmarked reel found in his late grandfather's attic in Bremen. Other users noticed something strange. No matter how you tried to delete it, it reappeared in your file system. Audio analyzers crashed when scanning it. When the file was muted, speakers still hummed, and when someone tried to convert it to MP3, their computer bricked, but not before playing one final tone. Within 72 hours of its upload, the following events occurred. One forum user went missing from their locked apartment in Sweden. Their computer was on. Headphones melted. Another, in Tokyo, was found walking down a highway, barefoot, whispering, "Ichri es. Es weint. I hear it. It cries." A sound engineer in New Jersey died of a sudden cerebral hemorrhage. The waveform of his brain activity at the time of death matched the frequency of the Nachtton file, and then List Ghost 13 vanished. His last post was one sentence: "I think it wants out." A user attempted to run a spectrogram analysis, turning the audio into visual patterns. What they saw chilled them. A series of interlocking spirals, and within the noise actual notations, identical to segments of die, let's still hidden messages in the waveform spelled out. "Feed me memory, I am not a recording, I was breathed." The forum was shut down days later by unknown actors, but the file was already out. Reddit, Discord, encrypted drives, and deaths began to follow, always the same. Headphones on .no wounds, eyes wide, hands clutching their chest. Experts tried to explain it. They blamed infrasound frequencies that trigger anxiety or hallucinations. They suggested mass hysteria, sleep deprivation, audio hacking, but none of that explained why. The file played through muted speakers. The file size kept changing by the hour. Some listeners claimed they began hearing the song in their dreams. And one neuroscientist, before his sudden disappearance, proposed something chilling. The Nachtton isn't music, it's a pattern, a parasitic idea that enters through the ears and builds itself inside the brain. In 2022, several darknet nodes hosting the file were shut down, not by site owners. By external intrusion. traced to IPs linked to the European Archive of Religious Anomalies, an entity officially defunct since 1987. An internal memo leaked months later stated, "The entity has adapted. It no longer needs wood, or silver, or lungs. Now it uses WAV and a final warning. Do not attempt to destroy the file. Destruction is just attention. IT wants to be played. IT is learning harmony. It has become digital, replicable, shareable. It's a virus, yes, but not one of code, one of tone, and every time it's heard. It remembers." In the museum, FR Historisch Kleinkunst, the Museum of Historical Sound Art in Leipzig, Germany. There's a flute on display. No plaque. No description. Just a QR code that leads to a dead web page. Visitors rarely linger there. Some say they hear it humming. Others swear the air goes cold when they pass. Very few say it feels like being watched. Experts say it's just an old piece of ash wood, warped by time and fire. But under spectral analysis, the flute reveals something terrifying. Microscopic metal inlays shaped like teeth, silver spiral bands that show wear patterns from centuries of breath, and inside the mouthpiece, remnants of blood. It doesn't match any known period. IT predates all known records. And yet, traces of it appear across history. Prague, 1615, Paris, 1783, France, 1917, England, 1954, Romania, 1994, the Deep Web, 2021. Whether it's myth or music, something keeps coming back, through flesh, through wax, through wire, through waveform. Each time, it changes form, but the pattern stays the same. A flute with spiral inlays, a melody that doesn't stay written, a victim that dies without wounds, a warning whispered too late. One audio engineer said it best: "It's not a melody. It's an organism, and every listener is part of its song." We think we're safe behind glass, behind science, behind rationality, behind silence. But music doesn't need permission. It slips into your ears, hides in your memory, and waits, because some instruments aren't built to be played. They're built to be heard, and once you hear it, you carry it. So next time you hear a melody you don't recognize, one that makes your skin prickle, that haunts your sleep, that no one else seems to notice, ask yourself, is it music, or is it calling something? Some songs were never meant to be sung.